Board Member Maguire.
Yes, thank you for the presentation and just raising a whole host of, I think, really instructive and helpful um, input and considerations. For me, one of the biggest challenges with this program has been um, what do we do in a drought? How do we address critical year water shortage conditions? That's when it gets really hard because we are making those balancing choices about uses, about environmental protection. And I think I've experienced it in a drought, and I think the board and all of us in California have through many droughts over our history. And it's been a tough one. And so I think the clearer we can be about those criteria and what the expectations are to have a plan in place for the next one when it comes along, I think is really warranted here to give some thought to. So I haven't heard a lot of input yet from water users, water right holders in that community in terms of alternative 5A. So I just want to keep that invitation open that I'm listening and interested in hearing thoughts and ideas and suggestions for, if you think it doesn't work, if you think it does work, or how might we tweak it or adjust it or come up with a strategy that might help address that question about having a plan for those year types. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Board member, could I jump in on there for just a moment? I just wanted to remind folks, we didn't discuss it today, but John Rosenfield discussed it in your last workshop. The NGO community worked very closely with the Bureau of Reclamation to develop what was called Alternative 3. We fully recognize that water management is hard in dry years. And we worked closely with the Bureau of Reclamation to develop Alternative 3, which finds ways to operationalize striking a balance, for example, between meeting flow and outflow requirements and meeting temperature requirements. And to their credit, the Bureau worked carefully with us to develop that model and to model it responsibly. It showed that it performed dramatically better than the other alternatives. Unfortunately, the Bureau didn't select that model, but I think it begins to get toward your point, and that is rather than relying on TUCPs to come up with a strategy in advance so that we have a strategy to get through droughts rather than just waiving standards. And we'd be happy to work with the board on a similar approach. Alternative 3 was just focused on the CVP. The Bay Delta plan is a much more complicated landscape with a lot of other projects and rivers, but we'd be more than happy to work with you on a similar approach that would get toward, I think at least in part what you're touching on, and that is the need for us to have a plan for droughts rather than just scrambling and waiving standards when we get there.
And if I could, I'd like to add one small framing issue. In the first year of a drought, you don't know you're in a drought. But what we've seen over the last droughts is that how we acted or how the different projects and other water users acted in that first year set the table for a very meager repast in the following years. And so addressing the problem by thinking about it in terms of what do you do in the first dry or critically dry year is essential, and not simply framing it in terms of droughts when we're already in a hole and there's very little management options left.
Appreciate that clarification and agree. And I think like I said, I think we have some real world experiences of some of those situations that have come up, and we should learn from that and adjust.